Remember how I said America was going to be back on this episode? I lied.
Hey, poor! Hey, poor! Hey, poor! You don't have to be poor anymore! Jesus is here!
The loudspeaker spoke up and said, Christianity is stupid.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, not far from the redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts is somewhere. I don't know where. He's leaving me alone. I'm not going to complain. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cat. Get over it. And America was all set to be on the show and then realized that she'd been invited to a wine tasting festival, so had to cancel on me. Like drinking wine with a bunch of people could be any cooler than doing a podcast. I did look at getting another co-host for this episode, but I wound up dealing with some personal issues this week and just didn't feel like doing much of anything because of that. And while it's not really germane to the show, I will mention briefly what those issues were, and I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance. This episode is all freeform me because the incident really forced me to be awfully more introspective than I normally am, and I'm still processing things. So it's going out late, and I'm not going to have a lot of time to do editing. I apologize for that. Essentially, what happened was this week I chose to end a relationship I had with a woman, and I'm not going to blame anybody for why it faltered. I'm sure there's plenty of blame to go around if one looks at it objectively, and there's no point in playing the teenage boy and whining over shit. But it really did force me to be introspective on a number of things. Because, one of the problems with the relationship, and with a lot of things, is that simply both she and I are having to focus our energies on keeping a roof over our head. And, she lives 1,000+ miles away from me, so, it's not like we're here together sharing the burden, and it's not like either of us could afford to pack up and move to where the other is so we could try and be together and work things out that way. And, I'm left sitting here just thinking, what the fuck am I going to do? Aside from the whole relationship thing. This job that I have, it could pay far better than I've made in a long time. Not enough to have a decent life, but, double some of my more recent jobs. Of course, I don't know when I'll hit the top out rate, so I'll actually be making that kind of money. There's no telling. They haven't said when you top out, only what the top out rate is. And ideally, if I was going to be smart with my money, since I have shitty luck getting roommates, the smart thing for me to do would be to sell this beer can, go live in a field somewhere, and just pocket all my money until I had a decent amount saved up. And then do whatever I wanted with my life. That's not a realistic option. nor is, I'll be honest, cutting off the podcast. Thanks to the wonderful listeners I have, I do turn a modest profit on the podcast. And I wouldn't have the roof over my head now if it weren't for this podcast. I'll be the first to admit that. Everybody out there who's helped me out financially, I really do appreciate it. But, you know, I don't know how to grow the numbers of the podcast any larger than that they are now. I mean, they're doing better, but, you know, I certainly don't have the numbers that say, well, hell, a good number of podcasts out there have. I'm doing slightly better than what the average podcast does, which guys like Tom and Cecil and the folks at Scathing Atheist are well above average. Well above average. And they work very hard and deserve all the fame and acclaim that they get. But, I mean, I don't really know how much more I can do with a show to change things up. So I will just keep plodding along and doing the best I can until I get some really good ideas. I have a couple of things that I want to work on that just require time, and I would have done it this week, but, you know, when you tell somebody you care about, this isn't working and I don't see how we can make it work, it's a little hard to go be creative afterwards. Especially when you're like me, who lives alone and isn't surrounded by creative people anymore. "30 years ago, almost, I was surrounded by guys who were artists, musicians, singers, and I now live in a part of the state that they're not so common. Well, there are those that exist, but their interests and mine don't overlap in any appreciable manner. I mean, I live near country music mecca, and, well, I just don't like no country music. God. So I've been thinking about what do I do, where do I go, and like I said, I don't have any answers. I mean, because let's say I hit the top out rate on my job. Still, I'll be making what really should be minimum wage in this country. Actually, technically, if you want to be specific about it, it's below what should be minimum wage, but it's far enough above minimum wage that I could, you know, I could have a car. But, you know, that's it. I have the minimum. You know, I have the bare minimum to survive. Slightly better than I am now, but, you know, not enough to enjoy life in the sense that, oh, wow, I get to take, you know, a vacation someplace easily enough. I mean, the last thing I had that was a vacation would be when I went to ReasonCon, and that was because the guys over at Unbuckling the Bible Belt were kind enough to pick up the tab for me to go. I'm sure I've said all this before, but I'm going to say it again. So, you know, and it's just, it's frustrating to me. I don't have any ideas. You know, at every job I've had, I've been known as the idea man because I've always been able to sit there and look at something and say, this is a better way of doing it. And at the good jobs I've had, they've been, you're right. At the bad jobs I've had, they've tried to fire me for having ideas. I'm not kidding. I had a supervisor go ape shit on me one time because I pointed out that if we moved a trash can a couple inches over, we'd have an easier path getting through an area. Insane, I know, but that's the America we live in, or at least I do. Maybe yours is better than mine, I don't know. And Fuzznuts has joined me and is using my leg as a scratching post, aren't you, you little shithead? And another troubling aspect about this is that there are so many things that I think of that I would like to do, either ones that would make me money or would just be fun to do, or both, and they're out of reach of me economically. It's like I sit there and I think, well, man, I could do this, but that'd be $100. That's $100 I don't have to spare. And there's just, all kinds of things realistically, I should say, well, just put that out of your head. Don't even think about doing that. But that seems like giving up. That's surrendering to the poverty I live in, which isn't what I want to do. And I have bits and pieces of things that would help me get out of the poverty or just do something entertaining. But I don't have all the elements, and I don't know when I'll be able to get all the elements. I have a foundry which I could do castings with and sell them or just make neat shit that I wanted. But I can't. The problem I have with that is there's two ways of casting materials, essentially, that are realistic for me to be able to do. One is called lost wax casting, and the other is called sand casting. The lost wax casting, I need a compound to do it, because I can't figure out how to get... You're supposed to be able to make... Well, let me stop being ahead of myself here and explain how lost casting works. Lost casting is... Wax casting is you make something out of wax, you coat it with a material like, say, plaster or something similar. Then you heat it up, melt the wax out of it, and once you've done that, then you pour molten metal into that, break the plaster or whatever, and you're done. You've got the object that you've tried to cast. Problem with that I've ran into is that I can't get the plaster to dry at the right rate when I'm putting on. It's either too slow or too fast, and nothing I can try fixes it. And I've talked to people who know something about this, and their response is, well, you really just can't do it with plaster. And I'm not trying to do anything complicated, mind you. It's all fairly simple stuff, and, these guys are like, just go out and buy some gray matter. That's the name of the commercial product, which is over $100 a bag, last time I checked, if I'm not mistaken. Now, you can do it with plaster. I have a book where the guy he's got all these pictures and he shows how he did it with plaster, but he left out something in his descriptions because, the plaster isn't drying at the right rate. And there's compounds that you can add to plaster that'll change the rate at which it's drying. I can't find them. Doing web searches, talking to people, nobody seems to know what I'm talking about, but I know I've read about it before. I just don't have the book that talked about it before, what those compounds were. So that's out. I can't afford the money for gray matter. I mean, in theory, I could manage to save up enough to get a bag, but in doing so, I would have just enough to learn how to use the stuff slightly, and not enough to be able to actually produce something that I could sell or use or what have you. The other method is green sand casting, and what that is you basically take damp sand, put it in a wooden box, and then make an impression of the object you want to cast into that wooden box, into the sand, cover it with more sand, separate the top and the bottom half of the box, pull the object out, do a few other minor little things, and you've got a sand mold. It's the most common kind of metal casting there is. I don't have the tools to make a box. I mean, I have them in the sense that, yes, I have a saw. But to do this, you've got to make the box fairly straight. I don't have the stuff to make the right kind of jig I would need to be able to do that. And I can't afford to buy it. And really, at the moment, I don't have a place for it because ideally, the perfect thing, and they're not terribly expensive, would be a table saw. But I don't have room in my storage shed to put a table saw, and I'm not about to put one in the house and use it in the house because, I don't have time to clean the house as it is. The last thing I need is sawdust all over the place. So that's out. And, like I said, the gray matter stuff, it's $100 a bag. I'd figure it out before I got to the end of the bag. But then by the time I got enough money saved up where I could get another bag, I'd forget how to use it. And, it's October here. I won't be able to cast. Let's say I had all the stuff I needed today. I had all the money I needed today. I wouldn't be able to cast but for maybe a month and a half, and then the weather gets too bad. And I wouldn't have been able to play with it too much this past year, because it was such a wet summer. Normally, in Tennessee, from like June to the end of August, we're dry as a bone, and we've had lots and lots of rain this year, and you can't pour metal outside like I'd be doing when it's raining. It's a good way to get yourself killed. So, that's out. And, I suppose it's silly that I just think, man, I can't do it. I don't know, but that's where I am. And, I don't have the people around me that I can interact with, that I, get ideas off of, because that's one of the things you learn when you deal, when you spend time isolated, as I have done over the years, and then you're with people. When you're with people, your mind starts coming up with all kinds of different ideas, because you're bouncing them off other people. They're saying something that triggers something, and you don't, when you're isolated, even with the internet, you don't get it, because you're not having quite the free-form conversation that you would with other people. Closest I've come in a while is this conversation right now. And I will say that, not having a car is a problem, but there's other aspects of it as well, because I actually had a listener, send me a message, say, look, I've got a car, I'm not using it, you can have it if you want it. And I had to turn them down because right at this moment, at the moment they offered me the car, I couldn't afford the insurance on it. I mean, because I haven't had a car and I haven't had insurance, the state's going to require me to get high dollar insurance because I'm a risk. So that would cost me a small chunk of change. And then, it doesn't matter what kind of car you have, it's going to need something. At some point it's going to need gas. It's certainly going to need an oil change, maybe a transmission fluid change, maybe some belts replaced, maybe new tires, whatever. I just don't have the spare money for any of that. And even if the car was in pristine condition, I'd be facing that sooner or later. And, because I wouldn't be able to gauge, will it get to, will it do this now or will it do it later? It's a risk. I don't have any savings. And until I get some savings, I don't want to think about getting a car. 10 years ago, I was working an underpaying temp job, but it was the only thing I could find, and the car I had died. So I was forced, because it was a bit of a drive to that job, I was forced to go to a car dealer that I knew that I'd gotten a car before from and beg the guy to let me pay him $100 as a down payment on a $3,000 car. He was nice enough to do it, but, I struggled because I didn't have any surplus cash, so anything that would have gone wrong with the car, I'd have been in trouble. Now, I was lucky. It was a good car, and at the time, I had family who was able to help me out, so when a few things did go wrong, they were able to cover it for me. But, I can't do that now. And I don't want to do it. But, I don't see how to dig myself out of this hole. I'm not asking to be a billionaire or a millionaire or anything like that. But I would like to be able to not have to sit there and think about every single dime I spent. Just to be able to say, I'll blow a couple of bucks on this thing here I may or may not need. Or, say, well, it would be not, it would be nice not to have to think of the trade-offs. It's like, well, I can get this now and then just not do that or whatever. It'd be nice to be able to pay my landlord the rent in full at the beginning of the month instead of paying him, $100 here, $100 there, as I have the money, and worry if I'm going to have enough money to pay the electric bill. I mean, I can do it, and I'm doing okay so far with this new job, but, I don't know how long it'll last. Nobody does. If you're realistic, nobody knows how long their job is going to last. They know how long it should last, but that doesn't mean things aren't going to change. There's always uncertainty, and I don't have the means to handle the uncertainty, and, I get locked in a loop. Can you tell? Where I just start thinking the same shit over and over again, and without being able to get out of that loop, I can't solve my problems. Hence this babbling I'm doing now. And I know from the messages that I've gotten from my listeners over the years, many of you are in the same spot as me. So, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, we have to help one another out, obviously. And my mother called in the middle of the recording, so I've lost my entire train of thought. She is, however, doing quite well. She just got back from a day trip. Ouch, Fuzznuts. Thank you for jumping on my shoulder at a key moment. Anyway, she just got back from a day trip to Cuyahoga National Park in Ohio. It's the first big adventure she's had since she got out of the hospital, and she said she handled it well, and she certainly sounded fine, so that's a relief. Okay, I just had to give Fuzznuts a can of wet food to get him to leave me alone, so I can think. He's been kind of affectionate lately, as usual, of course, but it's a little hard for me to think when I got a cat pawed in my face. But one thing I want to say is, we're looking at some really bad situations with this election, even if Hillary wins. And I'll give a mea culpa and say that I was totally wrong on what Trump was going to do at the debate. I never in my life, though in retrospect, I realize I should have known this, would have thought that he would have gone as batshit as he did. However, Anybody who has any doubts about Hillary being an effective president should have had them erased by watching her performance at that debate, because Trump did everything he could to rattle her cage and get her to lose her shit. And she held it together remarkably during that entire debate. No foreign leader will be able to harass her like Trump did. So, might not agree with her policies, and there's certainly plenty of hers that I don't, but I have no doubt that she'll do a good job as president. Trump, Of course, Trump, and this is the danger, is now saying, oh, the election's rigged. It's rigged. We're going to lose because they've rigged the election. So the question then becomes, what the hell happens when he loses? Do his followers simply accept it, or do they reject it and go all batshit? Now, Trump is saying that he's not going to accept it, although Mike Pence is saying that he's going to accept it. As per usual, they haven't talked to one another a while, so they don't know what the other one's saying. Which isn't a good thing. They just busted a militia group in Kansas who were planning on blowing up mosques the day after the election. That's really, really scary. Because we don't need nutters going around shooting places up and starting a race war because their candidate won or their candidate lost. And there's a firebombing of the Trump headquarters in North Carolina, but that's not really a huge deal because shit like that happens in every election. I can remember back in 2004, somebody was complaining about somebody attacked or vandalized the Republicans' headquarters somewhere, and they were claiming that this was a huge voter intimidation tactic. And I was like, no, that shit goes on all the time. Because just the other day, somebody had thrown a rock through the window of the Democratic headquarters not far from where I live. And the day after that, somebody did the same thing to the Republicans. I mean, it's an asshole move, but it's not unusual behavior. However, a bunch of guys plotting to shoot up a mosque isn't normal behavior. And when you've got somebody who's egging them on, basically, it's dangerous. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think Hillary Clinton said things to the effect that we should attack... people should attack Republican headquarters. Whereas, Trump has certainly said things that are pretty fucking crazy. And another interruption, this time from my ride, telling me that we have to leave extra early in the morning. Yay. Can't complain because if I didn't have the ride, I'd have to get up way earlier than I will tomorrow, but still, kind of throws me off my game when I'm going into this episode raw. Okay, I was going to try to bring this back around, but it's getting late. I've got to get up early, as I mentioned just a few moments ago. And I still have to put this together as best I can. So I'm going to cut it off here. My apologies for this being a short episode. Next week will be more of Second Esdras. I don't have a guest lined up for that yet. I'll try to do that this week. And God knows what Fuznuts just got into. So, thanks for listening. Sorry it's a short episode and a bummer of an episode, but I think you can understand.
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TN Tucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fuzz-Nuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.